Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. This is Harika. So in today's video, I'm going to start and explain about how to create a policy using automation ops. So in the previous video, I have given an overview about the different features that are available in automation ops. But in this video, we will take a next step and we will see how we can actually create a policy. So as I've mentioned earlier, in order to create a policy, you can create on a different products that are available in UiPath, right? So on the apps, in the governance tab, so once after you come over here, you can see there are a lot of products that are available, right? So you can apply and create the policy on any of these particular product. So now I wanted to show you or explain by creating a policy on the most commonly used feature if you are an RPA or UiPath developer, right? So which is Studio. I wanted to create a policy on the Studio. So now let me name it as Studio policy. Okay. And then I will add it. Cool. So now if you see, once after you add it, I'm going to talk about this policy's priority in future videos, because in order to show you the priority, I have to deploy the policy and there should be multiple policies. So I will showcase about a use case about the priority in coming forward videos. But in this video, I will explain you how you can create a studio policy using the ops automation ops. So first of all, just give a description about policy. This policy is used to apply the governance rules on Studio. Okay. So just a description about what this policy actually does and what are the different rules that you wanted to apply. So if you just scroll below, you can see there are actually a lot of tabs, right? So you have to modify at different levels. So at design level, there can be different rules that you can apply: general, feature, manage sources. So there are different types of rules that you can apply at different levels, various levels, right? So now at design level. So first of all, let's go one by one and understand what they actually mean. Okay. So if you see here, enforce analyzer before publish, right? So what does this mean? So if you see over here, so let me just open a particular project. Meanwhile, it opens, I will just take you through this one. Okay. So if you see here, enforce analyzer before publish. That means before it actually, when you click on publish, there happens a lot of actions, right? Like it will be compiling, it will be doing the validation and all of that things. So do you want to enforce the analyzer before you publish? That means it will check for all the workflow analyzer rules. So if that rule, all the rules are abided by the developer while creating the workflow or the project, only then it will allow you to publish. Otherwise it does not. So let's say if you keep it as yes, and then if you keep allow users not to override, then this particular thing will be enforced. Whenever the user click on publish, the workflow analyzer rules will be automatically checked in your studio, right? So let's keep this to yes. And then enforce analyzer before run. That means whenever the user creates a workflow, at every single time, all these rules will be enforced. So I prefer keeping this to no, because when you're actually just developing, when you run multiple times in order to check whether this is correct or not, right? So I think it's fine to keep it as no over here. So if you see here, analyze RPA XAML files only, right? So it means in or it will just analyze only the XAML files, because in your project you have JSONs, you have a lot of Excels maybe, or different types of files you will be having, right? So this is the option that you can enable or disable. So like that, you have multiple options over here. Enforce check-in before publish. That means you wanted to, this is with respect to before you publish, you want to check in the codes, like let's say if you are using any version controlling, so do you want to check in before you publish or not? So that is something you can apply over here. And coming to activities design, so the default language you wanted to VB or C sharp, or you wanted to allow the users to override, so you can just prefer based on your whatever you want. And use modern for projects. So right now what's happening, you can if you enable this option, use modern for new projects, then by default whenever the new project is created, the user will not be having any access to the classic. So modern will be enforced by default. And object repository, do you want to enforce or not? So if you see here, as soon as I click no, object repository has been gone, because if you are not using modern, there is no concept of object repository itself, right? So you can just keep it as yes, and then the object repository has been coming into the picture. And then slim view for collapsed activities, so this is with respect to the view, if you wanted the slim view, or how the view you wanted to visualize, right? So use the toggle to slim view for collapsed activities that only display the title bar. So instead of having the whole view of that particular activity, when you collapse, it just shows the title bar. If you want it or not, something you can decide, and you can enable or disable it. So this is with respect to the design basically, right? So then later we will go to the general activities. So if you see here, control the settings inside studio setting or general tab. Enable the settings you want to govern and leave disabled all the rest, right? Send anonymous UI descriptors. So if you see here, control the settings inside studio settings general. So if I just open here, so here in the studio, in the project settings, and then in the general, so if you open this particular thing, enable the settings you want to govern and leave disabled all the rest. So if you see here, in this particular thing, you can enable and disable, right? So whichever you wanted to govern, you can enable them and you can disable the rest of them. So if you see here, send anonymous UI descriptors, you want this particular activity or not, so is something that we can decide over here. So what does this actually mean is, enabling this setting will allow telemetry to collect UI descriptors. So with respect to whenever your UI descriptors, okay. So let me go through this thoroughly and then maybe I can comment on this. So send anonymous UI descriptors, maybe I believe it's not with specific to, because I see there is something called telemetry. Maybe I will comment on this once after I explore on this particular feature, because I believe this is something new I'm watching over here. Okay, fine. So let's go to the next one, which is feature toggles. So control general studio behaviors that are not configured by the end user, right? So here, if you see here, feature in the feature toggles, allow users to send feedback. So basically, if you see here, there can be some option, right? Here the user can send feedback. Here also, here is the option, right? So this is the place where the user can send feedback. If that can be allowed, you can allow it or no, you can decide over here. Hide getting started screen. So the getting started screen which comes up, right? So you can either hide it or not, is something you can show over here. So in by default it will be coming up instead of that screen. And this is very important, so especially when you're when you don't want any feeds or any packages from the marketplace, this is the place where you can restrict whatever the packages that you wanted to access, or whatever the feeds that you wanted to access, is something that you can configure from here, right? So these settings control feed management and configuration. Allow users to add or remove feeds. Allow users to enable or disable feeds. So if you see here, there are two things. So firstly, let me just show you in the manage packages, in the settings. So if you see here, I'm able to enable and disable. and also I'm able to add the sources, right? So here, if you just keep it, if allow users to add or remove feeds, allow users to enable or disable feeds, so you can actually configure this one. If you keep it as no and publish this, deploy this policy, the user cannot actually do anything over here. So if you see here, the orchestrator feed, I cannot do anything, right? Because it is something by defaultly it is available, right? So let's say if your organization does not want you to pick any package from marketplace, the they can actually do it from the ops. They can actually restrict that thing, right? And also if you see here, my myget.org and gallery.uipath or the sources that are available, right? And you can add the package from where you wanted to take this. And let's say if you don't want to get from here, you can delete this thing, right? So like that you can actually configure the packages. And so now let's talk about workflow analyzer. So for workflow analyzer, this is very, very crucial. And this is one thing maybe I wanted to take a separate video on workflow analyzer, because if you see here, there are a lot of rules and every rule will have a code and each code has its own significance. So we have to understand what this code means, and then we have to uh, analyze whether this particular configuration is needed or not, right? So for that purpose, I will do a separate video on workflow analyzer. I'll talk about all of these codes, and we will also see how we can blacklist URLs, how we can whitelist URLs, and how we can let the process run only when there's an idea of from automation hub is included, right? So all of those things I will be concentrating and explaining you in a separate video for workflow analyzer, because it's a little bit vast concept, right? And then talking about the location, right? So let's say if you wanted to the control the default location where projects are created, enable those settings you want to govern and leave disabled all the rest. So if you see the default location, if you set this particular thing, this is the place where the whenever you create a project, that's the this is associated with that. So let's say publish library URL, so you can give the path over here, so then it will be located into that particular location. Okay, so that's where the projects will be automatically getting created, right? So this is how you can do that. So you can also derive, if you wanted to create some custom workflow analyzer rules, you can give the location of that over here. And this is a project path. So whenever you create a project, into which location you wanted to save that, right? So by default, it will be having the UiPath. UiPath by default has a certain location to save all the project folders. So if you wanted to save it in a different folder, you can give that particular path over here. And where you wanted to publish the process, right? Whenever you're publishing, where you wanted to publish that process. So all of that you can actually provide here and you can save it, right? So this is how you can create based on, you just have to understand which particular thing is needed for you and which is not needed, and based on the relevance you have to analyze and you have to create a policy. So this is how you can actually create a policy. There are validation errors before submission. Let me see, maybe I've changed something. Okay, here. I think so. Allow users to studio policy one. Let me give as one. Save it. Okay. So you can see here. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me change this to studio policy, playing on studio. Okay. So I'll just save it. I think there is a issue with this. Okay. All the validation errors before submitting. Let me just have a look at it. So I believe there's a issue with the studio policy because I think it's a default or maybe some other policy got created in the backend. I'm not sure. So it was not letting me to allow with that. So I changed the name to two and then it worked for me. So yes, what I wanted to drive here is so this is how you can actually create a policy similar to what I have done here. So there are a lot of other things. So which I will also explore. And if there is something different or if there is something which I feel that I can make a video on, I can do and I'll show you. But however, this is the simple way that you can create a policy based on the governance rules that your organization want. Okay, so yes, and in the next video, I'm going to show you how all of this will you can deploy. And also the other point which I told you is when you deploy, there are two things that you have to consider. There are different levels of deployment, tenant level, group level, and user level. So that is something I'm going to showcase in the next video. And as well as I will showcase you how this priorities plays a role when you're deploying it with for a user with different levels of deployments. So that is something that I'm going to showcase in the upcoming video. So please check out the videos on my channel for various other concepts in the topic. And if you like the content and if you find them useful, please do let me know in the comments and also subscribe to my channel for the most informative content. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.